Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in today. As we move into September, it is National Cholesterol Education Awareness Month, and the end of the month will kick off with World Heart Day. So we're going to talk a little bit about cholesterol, where it comes from, why it's the silent killer, and what you need to know about it. So to start with, cholesterol is a type of fat that circulates in our blood and it has multiple functions. Our bodies make what we need regardless of what we eat. We do need some, but a majority of it comes from animal food sources. So this picture kind of shows you we have good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. The bad cholesterol, also known as low density lipoproteins, are the yellow ones here. The good ones, known as high density lipoproteins, you kind of see they have a little scoop, and that's to indicate that they actually help clean up the other fat that gets deposited in our arteries. So some of the roles of cholesterol in the body, other than what we might normally think of, cholesterol is actually essential for making cell membranes and other cell structures. It's responsible for nerve protection, nerve conduction, and insulation, which is a critical portion of our nerve health. It is vital for the synthesis of steroid hormones, such as our stress hormones like cortisol, and also the sex hormones. So estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone are all formed from cholesterol and vitamin D, which we absolutely need for bone health, as well as many other functions in the body. So as I mentioned already, low density lipoproteins, or the bad cholesterol, is what's responsible for delivering cholesterol to cells that need it, but in excess, it delivers and litters a little too much when levels are too high. So we tend to term it the dump truck because it deposits way more than is necessary in our arteries. The high density lipoproteins, or HDL, are responsible for carrying excess cholesterol and fat in our blood back to the liver for excretion. So sometimes it's nice to think about it like a garbage truck. It goes around cleaning up what the LDLs left behind. Are you at risk? It's an important thing to know. So some of the biggest risk factors are uncontrolled diabetes, and that can be type 1 or type 2, in part because chronic high blood sugar tends to make our blood more sticky, as does smoking. Family history is really important, and that's one of the biggest ones. So if anyone in your family has a history of heart disease, any kind of cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, or high cholesterol, you definitely want to get checked. Being physically inactive and having a poor diet can also put you at greater risk. So we definitely have to just talk really quickly about the genetic connection. Back in World War II, many of the young soldiers who were being killed on the battlefield were autopsied later, and it was discovered that people as young as in their late teens or early 20s who had a significant family history already were experiencing significant plaque buildup in their arteries, which is a little bit scary. It starts younger than most people realize. When it runs in the family, sometimes diet and exercise are not enough and medications can be required. So if you are someone that has a family history, you definitely want to get checked, even if you're young and think it doesn't apply to you yet, because it might. So why is cholesterol considered a silent killer? Because we don't feel it. There's no symptoms. We don't have nerve endings in our arteries to know what's going on. And most people never experience any adverse issues until it progresses to the point of causing major complications and disease. And it doesn't discriminate between athletes and couch potatoes. And what I mean by that references the previous slide. And that is, if you have a significant family history, just diet and exercise are not necessarily enough. There's actually a story about one of the most famous marathon runners from the late 70s named Alberto Salazar. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of him, but he actually had a heart attack when he was in his late 40s. And it kind of knocked the running world on their ear. And people started thinking, my goodness, if he isn't safe, then who is? And actually, it's not super uncommon for runners to drop dead of a heart attack. Well, if you look at his family history, what you'd quickly discover, and what was quickly discovered, is that his brother and his father both had heart attacks in their late 30s. So really, while there was that significant family history there, the exercise and the good diet probably significantly delayed the onset of what might have been inevitable anyway. And that's something really important to keep in mind. I also had a great friend in college whose father was a marathon runner, but tended to eat whatever he wanted. He had no problem eating an entire plate of brownies or a double cheeseburger and French fries as soon as he got back from a marathon. And her mother really only walked the dog and things like that. Well, one year when they got their annual physical, it was discovered that her father had extremely high cholesterol and high blood pressure, even though he wasn't experiencing any symptoms yet, even though he looked like the picture of health and he was a very accomplished runner. So he had to make some significant dietary changes and go on medication. But that's just goes to show you can't judge a book by its cover, and sometimes we don't know what's going on inside. So what can cholesterol lead to? Well, this is a great visual that kind of shows you. So the biggest issue is, of course, narrow or blocked blood vessels, also known as atherosclerosis. So I want to explain a little bit about what actually happens here. So the LDLs, as we mentioned before, if there is excess cholesterol or fat, they start depositing in the arteries. Well, what happens, I like to use the analogy of a water slide. If you can get that picture in your head, you had a beautiful water slide, water just flowing down it wonderfully, and someone came along and threw a bunch of gravel down your water slide. What would happen to the water flowing over it? It would start to get turbulent. It wouldn't be smooth anymore. Well, that's what happens in our bodies, and our bodies don't like that turbulence. So what they do is they lay down a scab or a plaque over top of it, and then it smooths out the flow again. It's almost like you took those rocks and you put a big sheet of plastic over top and kept flowing the water. It would get smooth again for a while until another load was deposited and it got turbulent again. So what we end up with are these layers of fat and then layers of scab over it. Well, if you've ever had a big scab on your arm or something, you know that they don't have a lot of elasticity. If you bump it, it's very likely to break open and bleed. And that's what happens when a plaque ruptures. One of the other major issues to consider is that our blood vessels have what we call smooth muscles. We don't have to think about it at all, but if our bodies need to increase blood flow to our muscles, say because we're exercising, or increase blood flow to our stomach because we just ate, then the vessels that are supplying those areas will dilate. If we need to pull blood away from an area, let's say you're cold and your body needs to pull blood away from the surface of your body and towards your internal organs, your blood vessels will constrict. Well, if a blood vessel has a bunch of plaque and scab in it, it can no longer expand and contract on its own. So our bodies lose the ability to regulate our blood flow. In addition, of course, the artery gets much more narrow and the actual path for the blood cells becomes significantly limited. Unfortunately, most people aren't even aware this is happening until the blood flow is so compromised that they begin to have something like chest pain or being extremely lightheaded or something like that. One of the major issues, of course, can be if these plaques rupture and they break free, those blood clots can lodge in another blood vessel. Any organ or muscle or anything that is unable to get blood and therefore oxygen for even a short amount of time will die. That's really what a heart attack is. It's a blocked coronary artery. And if a coronary artery gets blocked, the muscle on the other side of that artery will experience significant damage. So very often people with significant plaque buildup like this have to have a procedure called an angioplasty to open it up to get rid of all the junk in there. But because the blood vessel walls are so weak, it has to be propped open with what's called a stent. It's actually a very tiny little mesh cage that props those artery walls open and restores the blood flow. That's pretty scary, but you can also see why the blood pressure would go up because the blood has a lot less room to get through. So know your numbers. We're not going to go through all of these because it's a lot, but I am sending this presentation out to all of your site engagement leads. And I'm going to ask them to go ahead and share that with you so you can refer back to this, because it's really important to know what your numbers are and to get them checked regularly if you are someone that's at risk, especially. We're not going to spend too much time on blood pressure here, but going back to that picture that I just showed you, you can kind of get the idea. I'll give you a visual in your mind, and that is if you've ever drank something through a straw and then drank something through a coffee stirrer. I know that's kind of sounding silly, but get that visual in your mind. If you're trying to get the same liquid through a coffee stirrer, those little teeny plastic things, you're going to have to suck a lot harder on that straw to get through. Think about the pressure in your head trying to move the same amount of liquid through a smaller space. That's what happens to our blood pressure and why it increases. We'll talk more about that on World Heart Day. So good news. Most of the time, diet and lifestyle changes can make a difference in our cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood pressure. So what are some things that we can do? Well, first of all, make sure you're getting enough sleep every night. That's actually very critical for many, many reasons. If you're smoking, maybe talk to your doctor about quitting if that's a challenge for you, because again, it makes your blood a little more sticky and more likely to clot. And exercise. Start small and increase as you're able. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends 150 minutes per week of moderate activity, but if you're just starting out, you can start small. Any kind of movement will help. So how exactly does it help? Well, exercise actually has been shown to increase the enzymes that take those bad low-density lipoproteins out of the blood to the liver to be excreted. It also actually enlarges the lipoprotein itself, which makes it harder for all those bad fats to get into the lining of our blood vessels and therefore our organs. And exercise really helps improve circulation overall. So will exercise reverse cholesterol, high cholesterol, or prevent it? In a lot of cases, it can. But again, you can't out-exercise a bad diet, a higher risk lifestyle choices, or genetics. So if you are that active person who's still smoking or consuming large amounts of alcohol, fast foods that have a lot of animal fat in them, those things need to be taken into consideration. However, all that said, even if you are genetically predisposed to have high cholesterol, exercise and diet may significantly delay and or reduce the buildup and the severity of symptoms that you have. The greatest impact is seen with changes in both diet and activity. I often get the question, well, what is the best exercise? And my answer is the one you'll do. I put a picture here of a playground because I want you to start thinking about something you love. Find something you love to do and just do it. You know, kids playing on a playground don't know they're exercising, but they are. Exercise doesn't have to be something you dread. And if really what you're looking for is the heart health benefits, you can get those benefits from minimal amounts of activity with relatively low impact. And I've seen it happen. We're also going to be kicking off for those who want to participate. Your individual site engagement specialist will give you any details. Strive for 15 or 1-5 and thrive. And all that's going to be is starting today and going through the end of the month. So for 15 days, just strive to add 15 minutes of activity to your day in whatever way, shape, or form that is. But that's usually kind of a realistic goal for most people, even if you're just starting out. And you can break it up, even if you did 5 minutes 3 times a day. So what should you be eating? Well, again, this is a link, and I will be sharing this presentation so you can go there, coming out of harvardhealth.edu. And that is the healthy eating plate. It's a great place to start. So we'll just highlight it quickly. Ideally, a healthy portion of your plate should be coming from vegetables and from whole grains. And by whole grains, you know, we're really referring to even things like wheat, brown rice, things like that, that actually have the whole germ layer still intact. There's nothing wrong with rice, but if we're getting like the instant boil and bag type stuff, all the fiber has been stripped off of it, and you're just not getting as much nutritional value out of it. So ideally aiming for things like that. When it comes to protein, going for things like fish, lean poultry, nuts and beans, some of the more plant-based things. Ideally avoiding things like cheese, fattier cuts of meat, and processed meat for many different reasons. And we're going to talk a little bit more on World Heart Day about how some of the latest diet, you know, fads, I guess you could say, and things that are all the rage, how those can affect your heart. So we're just going to touch really quickly on fiber. And again, this is a link as well, coming from the same place. But fiber, we normally think of it, you know, of course, for digestive health, but especially soluble fiber literally acts like a pipe cleaner. It clings to unhealthy fats, both in our digestive system and in our blood vessels, and it takes it right out of the body with it. So thinking about what it is, it's a non-digestible, like the structural part of a plant, which is why you want your grains to be whole, because they still have a lot of fiber intact. Fiber totally lowers cholesterol. It helps manage blood sugar and of course enhances digestive function. The recommended daily intake is 25 to 35 grams a day for most adults, but I will throw a caution out there, and that is if you're not eating very much in the way of fiber now, increase it slowly. Otherwise, you might end up with some undesirable symptoms that we don't need to go into here. I wanted to just touch quickly on heart healthy fats as well, because these are the fats that will increase the HDL, which helps to clean your arteries up. A lot of that's going to come from things like omega-3, omega-6, which are found in cold water fish and also found in things like nuts and seeds. I put a big caution here because while these fats are heart healthy, we don't need much of them. We need these healthy fats in thimblefuls, not cupfuls. So if you want to eat nuts, those are great, but a serving of nuts is literally like 5. It's not a whole handful, and you just want to be aware because it packs in a lot more calories and you can end up getting more than you need very quickly. With olive oil and things like that, it's wonderfully heart healthy, but you don't want to just pour it onto things, whether it's in a frying pan or whether it's on a salad dressing. It's much better to keep it to the side when you're cooking. Get a spray and spray sparingly. If it's a salad dressing, keep it on the side and only dip the salad in there. Don't pour it on your plate so it creates a puddle. Just real quickly also about the omega-6 and omega-3s. Omega-3s, I touched on this briefly in some of our tips of the week last week, and that is those omega-3s have been really shown to have some heart protective effects and also reduce inflammation. There's many, many reasons why they're a really great thing to add to your diet. So here's just a list of things that's great to have in your pantry all the time. It can make your life a little bit easier, especially if you don't have a lot of time to cook. So again, I will be sharing this so that you don't have to read it now. But if you want more information, of course, reach out to me. I am more than happy to schedule a one-on-one with anyone. I will be staying on for at least 5 minutes afterwards for any questions that you may have. But I've linked the organizations where most of the information in this presentation has come from, and there's a bunch more here. So when you get this, definitely check those out. If you have more questions, don't forget, strive for 1-5 and thrive for the rest of this month. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone.